Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ethan Orphe, alongside Mr. Brice Lewis.
Yes, sir.
Brice, how was your Christmas? How's been your holiday season thus far?
It was good, man. It was good. You know, I didn't do too much, man. Just chill with the family. You know, had a good time. You know, just watch some basketball games at the time, and you know, just relaxing, man. How about you?
It was cool, man. I also been watching some basketball. I saw that Lakers game. Of course, I watched my Pelicans play and get the dub. Brandon Ingram 7 threes.
Mm-hmm.
Pay him the max.
Yes, sir. That's what you need to do. Have him and Zion come back next year as a duo.
Zion's coming back this year.
You think he is?
He has to. I'm predicting January.
Okay, man. I think people want him to stay out so he can still win Rookie of the Year next year.
I don't know. You heard it here first, not on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Hey, I do host that show, so that's just a little extension of my show. So, but yeah, man. So we gotta get to that NFL talk, man.
Yeah. So what are we getting into?
You know, Week 17 ended yesterday, and now we know who's all set for the playoffs. I'll go ahead and give everybody the seeding 1 through 6 for both conferences, starting with the AFC. Your number 1 seed and home field advantage throughout is the Baltimore Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson. They've had a fantastic season, and they're going to be really tough to beat going up to Baltimore. Defense has improved again in the year, and offensively, they're one of the best offensive teams in the NFL. The second seed was the Kansas City Chiefs. They were able to get the second seed in a bye based off the fact that the Miami Dolphins were able to defeat the New England Patriots yesterday, and I think that's going to be crucial for Kansas City because now they feel like their Super Bowl hopes have probably improved. Third seed, New England Patriots, obviously disappointing, losing to Miami yesterday. Now they're having to play in the wild card round for the first time since 2009. For the fourth, the Houston Texans, led by Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Watson. They didn't really play their starters yesterday against Tennessee because they already knew they were going to get the 4th seed. So, you know, they just did like whatever. The 5th seed in the wild card, the Buffalo Bills. It's a 10-6 record, led by Josh Allen. Coming in with a little bit of a slump, losing to the Patriots and the Jets, but it'll be interesting to see what they do in the playoffs the first time they've been there, I think about 2 years. And lastly, who just got in yesterday and was clinched by a Derrick Henry run, which helped him break the rushing leader board and become first in the league, is the Tennessee Titans. And now, so going to the NFC, the number 1 seed in the home field advantage throughout was the 49ers, led by Jimmy Garoppolo. Fantastic win yesterday and a great classic in Seattle. Number 2 seed is the Green Bay Packers. Number 3 is the Saints. 4 is the Philadelphia Eagles, who got in by beating the Giants yesterday in a great game to get that 4th seed. Congrats to them, especially with all the injuries. The 5th is Seattle, and then 6th is Minnesota. So Ethan, after hearing these standings, what do you think? Who is a team that may be dangerous coming into the playoffs?
Dangerous. I think on the AFC side, a dangerous team is got to be the Titans, just because I think they snuck up on a lot of people. People weren't checking for the Titans. That division at a certain point flip-flopped from are the Colts going to usurp the Texans for this division till the Colts got hurt quite a bit throughout the season. Then the Texans kind of gained control, and now the Titans kind of snuck in there. You know, they started with Mariota. Mariota was not playing very well. They got Ryan Tannehill going, and now all of a sudden they are a playoff team, and they're really starting to gel with one another. A.J. Brown has become. He might be able to steal Offensive Rookie of the Year away from Josh Jacobs. Possibly. It's either between him, Josh Jacobs, or Kyler Murray, probably, I would think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably that'd be the top 3.
So I would say the Titans, just because their team is very solid, they don't make a lot of mistakes. And Tannehill is playing good football. Like he's a good starter. And I don't think a lot of people were willing to say that a few weeks ago or like a year ago when he was on Miami. And it's just a weird. NFL has been really weird this season with quarterbacks and how things are going. We have Mr. 30 for 30 down in Tampa. We don't even know how to judge quarterbacks anymore. Is James a starter or is he a bench player? Like we don't know. He might win you some games and he definitely can lose you some games. And that's just where the NFL is at right now as far as the bottom tier or the middle of the pack is that nobody's perfect. Everybody has their weaknesses. Everybody knows their weaknesses at this point. So the playoffs are about to get real as far as exploits and knowing how to abuse certain matchups. And there's going to be teams are going to be more heavily scouted because every win counts and every possession is going to be pivotal to really go score the ball. So teams like the Patriots who started the season who went 11-1 before they finally finished out the season. I believe 12-4. 12-4. So we know what they can do and what they can't do. What they can't do is get open. As far as we know they can't get open, right? So teams are going to start trying to really pin them down. And Belichick is still the best head coach in football. So I'm sure that he'll have a game plan for other teams as well as he faces off, and he'll get his team in the best chance for them to win. But the Patriots are not what they used to be. And I know we've said this for the past 3 seasons, but I think this time is for real. They're not what they used to be. And what they used to be is a really, really, really dominant defense. They're a good defense. We thought they were going to be dominant for most of the season, but they've tailed off. Injuries and just war of attrition stuff has taken place. And we've seen players really break the mold of their schemes and stuff. So someone like Devontae Parker, who just recently got paid, he gave it to Stephon Gilmore, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, boy, gave it to him.
And that was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate right there. And we gotta check things. Now we gotta look and see have we just been hoodwinked? Have we been? I'm sure he's still probably gonna win it. He's the best corner in football right now for sure. Between him and Tre'Davious White, but at the end of the day, in a one-on-one matchup, Devontae Parker definitely won the matchup for sure. So. When you look at that kind of stuff, you gotta be careful. Maybe A.J. Brown gets the best of Stephon Gilmore, the other corner on the opposing side, just because of the size matchup, because he's humongous, right?
Yeah, you notice these receivers, especially the 2 receivers that stand out, like A.J. and DK Metcalf, they look 6'4". They look huge.
Both from Ole Miss.
They both buff.
They
look so big. All this is dang, they don't look like how the receivers were built. Randy Moss, when he came out, was still skinny, but boy, AJ, you see the beef on him.
Bro, I don't know where they came.
Ole Miss, they be feeding him something up there.
I don't know where they came from with all that. But honestly, though, I think Titans from NFC, I think every team besides really the Eagles have some sort of a shot. I'm not so sold on Minnesota and Green Bay, just because Minnesota, their team heavily depends on Dalvin Cook, and we don't know just how healthy Dalvin Cook is. And honestly, Green Bay has been getting away with some sloppy play in recent games, and I don't know if that's going to translate well into the playoffs when they actually play some really tough teams. And we'll just see what happens. Aaron Rodgers has not looked like the Aaron Rodgers of old, who is very dominant and has a big presence on the field. As his presence is still there, but it's not nearly as overwhelming. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be leading one of those miracle comeback games like he's been known to do in the playoffs beforehand. So we still have some more identity discovery stuff to see from them, and especially from the Minnesota Vikings. Now we got to know what their team is now as far as the offensive end, because I don't think Dalvin Cook is going to be 100% if he does play at all. And the Eagles are just hurt. They're playing with a lot of heart, though. They're hurt, but filled with heart.
The only thing I say about the Eagles, though, is just if they can win that first game and Deshaun Jackson does come back, they are slightly more interesting in that regard because they got a wide receiver back now that we don't know how much he can do, but that's another weapon. If Greg Ward comes back healthy, that's another weapon. And, they have some guys. Zach Ertz probably, if he can get back, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They'll have maybe a slight, and they can make it interesting. We'll say that. They'll make it interesting.
Right. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. And after that break, when we come back, we're going to talk about the games from Sunday afternoon and evening and what we thought about them coming up.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back. So last time we were speaking about the season standings as the NFL regular season has concluded. And now we're going to get into what we saw from Sunday's games. We've got a good one. The Sunday night game was really good.
Mm-hmm. Great finish.
And we got some interesting endings to some games. We got a underdog win of the century the Patriots losing to Miami.
Yeah, man.
And then, of course, Tennessee handles business against a resting Texans team. So that was definitely something interesting to see just because of some accolades were achieved in that game. But you want to talk about the marquee game of the day?
Yeah, man. I'll talk about a couple for you, man. So yeah, we're gonna first talk about the early marquee game that wasn't supposed to be a marquee game, but ended up becoming a marquee game because of the importance of the outcome, which is Miami and New England. Obviously a lot of people predicted New England would win this game. This should be an easy game for them, block up number 2 seed, it was whatever. But Miami came out there and showed them why they played better down the stretch. Miami has finished the season 5-4, so clearly they're playing much better than they played at the beginning of the year. Ryan Fitzmagic show why they call him that, lighting up the New England secondary with Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki. Really, New England just look very out of sorts. They don't look like the same New England team before because the old New England team would never let this happen. But if you also think about it too, when they've played Miami the last 2 years, they've also kind of had some of the worst moments. Like we can't forget about the Miami Miracle from a year ago. And then, you had the season with them this year and then you lose a chance at a first round bye. So that was a big game. It's going to be interesting to see what the Miami Dolphins will like next year, but it's also going to be interesting to see what happens with playoffs with New England because some people are starting to wonder, even though you're going to still go with New England because it's New England, it's almost just like if Tennessee beats them, it's like, okay, if Miami can't, why can't Tennessee, So it's one of those types of games. And then we're going to talk about another marquee game, which is the last game, the primetime game. The 49ers and the Seahawks. A great, fantastic game. First half was dominated by the 49ers, but in the second half, Russell Wilson really got going. Beast Mode got his first touchdown in Seattle in years. It was a great game. Both teams were making plays. Every time Seattle scored, the 49ers scored. It was a back and forth affair for the most part. They just really came out there and competed at at the highest level. And then it came down to literally, it's like, if you remember the 49er game against the Falcons where Julio had just got the ball over the plane, that's basically what happened here, except this time they actually stopped the Seattle tight end from crossing the plane and winning the game. Because that was also a fourth down, so that was a turnover on downs. So, obviously, the 49ers, when it comes to very close games, it's going to be one that's going to make you leap out of your seat because it seems like in close games, they've lost a lot of close games. And so this game was important for them to win a game like this because they haven't won a lot of games like this. And It's just important that going into the playoffs that they get a win like this to show they can win in these types of situations. Because, again, the 49ers are, with home field advantage throughout, expected to be in the NFC Championship game, depending on however it happens in the divisional round when they get their first home game out of the two. So, that was a great game. But also you saw some things from Seattle. They look like a dangerous team. They're going to fight to the end. Obviously, Russell Wilson, you can never count yourself out. They're always going to keep fighting and trying to the end. So those were the top two marquee games. What about you? What other games stood out?
The games that I watched yesterday, as far as standing out, of course, I watched Sunday night game. A little bit about that. I really thought there was an angle on that goal line play that I thought was really interesting because one of the refs, the guy from New York or whoever, he said that he might have crossed the plane from one angle, and no one really talked about it afterwards. I thought that might have actually made some humongous change in the game. Because from that angle, it did look like the ball just barely touched the plane. But I guess it was one of those things where it was not enough. It was not enough to overturn. But that hit was crazy. When you watch that full speed, Hollister got rocked.
Because usually it's like the opposite player hits and then it's like a standstill, or he slightly moves forward, then gets pushed back. But this time the 49er defender came and just moved back as soon as he made contact.
Leveled him too. It was no dirty hit or anything. He just went and put pad to pad and put him to rest. Pad to pad and put him to rest. But for real though, it was a really exciting game. It felt like a playoff game. They were playing like everything was on the line, even though both of them were going to go to the next round. But clearly they're not. I think there's going to be another matchup between them. I don't know when that would. I think if the playoff season is correct, I think they may have to play again.
Well, because whoever wins the wild card, whoever the lowest seed is, plays number one. So technically, if Minnesota loses and then Seattle beats Philadelphia, then they would play the 49ers in the divisional round of the playoffs.
Right. So we'll just have to see what happens. But definitely, they didn't use beast mode as much as I thought they were going to. I think he was getting it going later on in the second half, but it got to the point where they just had to pass the ball too much. And Marshawn is just not a pass the ball type of back right now.
They were making that joke about it was like at the end of the game, they were close to the goal line, and they took that game delay a game, and everybody's kind of making that joke again. Like, why didn't you just hand it to Marshawn? There was your chance to redeem yourself right there.
Yeah. But, I mean, I don't even know how the delay of game even happened. That was, the biggest thing.
Yeah, it's like, how do you get a delay of game in that situation?
And then the no pass interference call on Hollister, the play before he got lit up, or the two plays before he got lit up was kind of wild. But, it was just a really good game. The next game that I thought was interesting was the 30 for 30. When we look back at Jameis Winston's career, this might be the highlight.
They really might do a 30 for 30 on this, called 30 for 30.
Because it just doesn't make sense. How can you judge a player when he has 15 or 5,100 yards on the season, 30 touchdowns, but also 30 interceptions, most in the season, and 7 pick sixes, most in the season in NFL history.
You know what they say? Jameis Winston is a very productive player for both teams.
It's unreal. How did half of his wide receiver core was hurt by the end of the tail end of the season, and you could argue that this team should be a playoff team. They have the bones to be a playoff team, right? They have the makeup of being one on the defensive end for sure. Their defense is really good, in my opinion, and their offense can score a lot of points when they're hot. And Jameis is not throwing the game away, so to speak.
Because honestly, if you cut those interceptions in half, he only had 15. That's 15 less picks in games. Don't you think maybe the Tampa Bay Bucks could have won maybe 2-3 more games because of that?
I was listening to the Falcons radio call, and they put out an interesting stat that I think for 6 straight weeks, the they started off the game with a turnover. That's unreal.
Mm.
That's unheard of. Like, that's not how you win football games.
Yeah, man.
So it's interesting to see what will happen with Jameis Winston on that team. I know. Did you watch did you see the press game or the post game press conference from Jameis, where he said, "If you look at the stats, I've been balling." And I think that's the most Jameis thing I ever heard in my life. That was so funny to me. It's like, if you look at the stats, I've been balling.
And later, when we talk more about Jameis, Bruce Arians also made a statement about his future as the quarterback there in Tampa Bay. So,
yeah. So there was that game. I found the Eagles game was kind of what we expected to see. I don't think the Giants really. I guess maybe the Giants really just didn't want to see the Cowboys get in. Because the Cowboys definitely handled their business against the Redskins,
which is expected. If you think about the two matchups, the Cowboys had the easiest one out of the matchup. Because the Giants have weapons. They just don't have a great defense and offensive line issues. The Redskins are just not that good overall.
Yeah, the Redskins are all over the place, so it was kind of easy to see how that would really take off. So now we have another, 7-9 Cowboys season. I really thought we were going to get... it's 8-8. Yeah, it is another 8-8
I think they said that was the fourth one that Jason Garrett's had during his tenure. His fourth 8-8 season.
That is insane.
Yeah.
So that's what, 4 this decade?
I want to say yes. It's either 3 or 4. And then they've only made the playoffs 3 times this decade, which is the fewest, tied for the fewest in franchise history.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jason Garrett coming up after this break, as we're going to talk about Black Monday, which, not to be mistaken by Black Friday, Black Monday is a lot of bad things for real. No deals here. A lot of coach firings. And we're going to be talking a bit about that coming up next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast, where last segment we talked about what we saw from Sunday's games and what we thought about the marquee game of the week and just some interesting plays, the 30 for 30. And now we're going to talk about something that usually comes after every last Sunday of the NFL season, which is known notoriously as Black Monday, as the coach firings across the league are starting to pile up. Brice, what do you got for us?
Well, interesting. Usually Black Monday, as you know, is firings, but we actually had a hiring. Ron Rivera, former head coach of the Carolina Panthers, agreed to be Washington's new head coach. Also, Washington also fired Bruce Allen, who has been the GM in Washington for many, many years. A lot of people look at him as one of the reasons why they've never been able to consistently put a good product on the field, overpaying players, not paying players, and making just wrong personnel decisions. Ron Rivera is obviously very, very well respected around the league. People feel like he is one of the best coaches in the league. It's just, in Carolina, things just, didn't work out. And obviously, but it also didn't help in the Panthers' case, because after they fired him, the Panthers just quit on the season. And they got destroyed by literally every team they played after that. So, Riverboat Ron, as they call him, he's a guy I think is going to be, if they're making a culture change in Washington, he would be a guy I definitely would want to hire to spearhead my culture change and to move forward into the future with my team, because he's done a lot of things well when he was in Carolina. They said that, there are some things with Cam and some immaturity issues and other things, and he kept that under wrap. He handled it, and he's just one of those guys. He's kind of like an alpha male. He's gonna handle the business that needs to be handled and get these guys ready to play. And I feel like, again, if this is part of the coaching change for Washington, this is a great selection for them. I feel like, especially if you're going to go with Dwayne Haskins as your quarterback into the future, you got some guys. It's not like Redskins are completely talentless. They have some guys. They have some players. And so I feel like that's going to be very important to get that straight. Also, the Giants fired Pat Shurmur. He was 9-23 in 2 seasons. And when he was also head coach of the Browns, he was 9-23 in 2 seasons. So you basically got what you paid for, which is a 9-23 coach in 2 seasons. So I think this was a very big move. The only thing is that they should have let go also David Gettleman, because I feel like he's also part of the problem. And they kept him. So I feel like that's interesting when they kept someone who is maybe part of the issue and not part of maybe a future solution. But, they have some guys, they have some talent on the New York. You got Daniel Jones, Saquon, Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, Evan Ingram. They got to get that defense straight and just make some different personnel decisions, and they can maybe compete again next year. But it's going to be important they hire a head coach that, who's a good teacher and a good leader of men. And I think that's going to be very important for them to make sure they hire the right guy for the job. And then another firing, Freddie Kitchens was fired out of Cleveland. Everybody kind of expected this after seeing all this talent that Cleveland had go to waste. Odell complained a lot. Jarvis complained a lot. Baker just seemed out of sorts. You had the leading rusher and stopped giving him the ball at the end of the season. It seems like Freddie Kitchens was in over his head. He never had the experience of being a head coach or even a coordinator right before the firing of Hugh Jackson last year. And I just feel like this just was too much for him. And definitely Cleveland needs a guy like Ron Rivera to come in there and control the room, especially if they do end up keeping Odell and everybody. You need a strong personality that can handle those guys. And there's some guys that out there they might be still able to get potentially to do that. I feel like that they've maybe had some early suggestions that maybe Mike McCarthy might be one of the guys because he dealt with Aaron Rodgers for years. But we'll have to see what they actually end up doing. Obviously, teams are starting to request interviews today and everything. Either is there any firing or non-firing that hasn't happened that surprised you maybe?
Surprised me? No. I think I've been waiting for the Freddie Kitchens departure for most of the season. I thought it was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be during the regular season or afterwards. And it's interesting to see just how the Browns season went from instant hype, Super Bowl aspirations from the media standpoint into a really just disappointment. The Browns turned into the disappointment of the NFL season, and it wasn't short of anything but that, really. They have one of the best running backs in the league, 2 of the best wide receivers in the league, a tight end who was a promising young tight end, even though he was injured. And they had a quarterback who, at the end of last season, looked like he was starting to figure out some things. And the regression that he's had this season has been one of the main points of the Browns' demise as far as the season has gone. And just the play calling of Freddie Kitchens, which is not up to par. And decision-making and in big game scenarios, I just don't understand. It's just a weird, for the talent they have on that team, for them not to be at least to where the Steelers were. They lost to the Bengals.
Mm-hmm. How horrible way to end your season, losing to the Cincinnati Bengals.
The worst team in the NFL. The Bengals. The Joe Burrow Bowl. They already won. Not only did the Bengals win, if Cleveland doesn't figure it out and say like next year, if Joe Burrow is anything like what we've seen so far, calling it now, the Bengals will be a better team. Because there's no way if that team is still dysfunctional next year that any of those players are going to be there. And the Browns are going to be right back where they were a few years ago, where they're just going to have to soft reset after continuous soft reset of everything they do. And it's really sad because you want to see a team like the Browns be successful at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point, everybody else in that AFC division has seen some sort of success. The Ravens have had success in the past, and they're having success now. The Steelers have had success in the past, and they, this season wasn't the best for them, but they gritted and tried to get their way in the playoffs, but it just didn't work out for them. But they didn't give up.
Mm.
And the Bengals, they've had moderate success in this past decade,
especially the beginning of the Andy Dalton era.
Yeah,
they made the playoffs like 4 or 5 straight years.
All right, they've been entertaining, so to speak. The Browns their best form of entertainment is making a small noise and getting to 6-10.
Yeah, the last season Cleveland had, they had a winning record and made the playoffs. It was back, I think, in 2007 when Derek Anderson was still playing in the league. Do you remember that year? That year, I think Braylon Edwards was the number 1 receiver.
Yeah,
that team. That's literally been almost 13 years since Cleveland's even had a decent year.
It's really sad to see. Next thing I would probably like to talk about is the Jason Garrett, because Jason Garrett can't get fired per se. He is only able to just not be renewed a new contract because his contract is up. And I think the general consensus that he will not remain the head coach there for much longer. And people have been talking about rumors of Urban Meyer being brought there. And it's just weird. Yesterday, on Sunday, me and Brice went to Longhorn to sit and watch some of the Dallas game and the midday games. And we were sitting next to this guy who seemed to be a Dallas fan. And all he did was talk about how Jason Garrett just has to go.
Yeah,
I like the guy, but
he gotta go.
When you don't win for a decade, barely make it to the first round, you just have to go.
Yeah.
So I think even the Dallas fans at the Longhorn understand when time is up and it's time to go. But at the same time, I don't know who Jerry's going to put in that position to fill, just because I don't think he's the type of guy who likes to butt heads with people. Mm-hmm. It's either his way or the highway. And just like the guy Longhorn said, Jerry Jones likes to have all the credit. Mm-hmm. That's why him and Jim Johnson had some problems.
And that's why I said don't be shocked if he went out and got Freddie Kitchens, because he could control Freddie Kitchens, even though that'd be absolutely disastrous. And every Dallas fan would probably just sell their stock on the team and say, I'm done with this team. I'm done with this franchise. They might start protesting that Jerry Jones sell the team, but you can't really bring in a guy like Urban Meyer and then expect him just to say, okay, with the stature and the status of Urban Meyer, he's just going to listen to Jerry Jones. You can't expect that, because Urban Meyer, even though he's never coached as a head coach on the professional level, with his prestige coming from the college ranks, he's just not going to sit there and just be a puppet for Jerry Jones. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's going to be interesting to see who they can hire, because they even said that when Jason Garrett addressed the team after meeting with the Joneses, it sounded like a goodbye. It sounded like he was just like, "Hey, I'm about to go, guys. Y'all just keep doing what y'all do, keep playing hard, and I wish y'all the best." So, because they never want to, because sometimes they never want to come out and say, "Yeah, guys, they let me go." They're just gonna be like, guys, I've been so happy coaching y'all for the past however many years, and I just want y'all to do good. And it's just like, as a player, just like, yeah, they let him go. So,
all right, we gotta take a quick break, and coming up after that, we're gonna go to some general news across the league.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, welcome back. Last time we talked about some coach firings, some coach hirings, and some GM firings as well, and some re-signings. You can't fire Jason Garrett. Remember that.
Yeah.
Jason Garrett will never, if he is let go, he was never fired. So let's get on with the general news across the league. One of the bigger things that happened over the weekend was the Saints brought in Antonio Brown for a workout. What happened, Brice?
So they brought him in for a workout, and one thing that they told Antonio Brown was, do not bring an entourage. And Antonio Brown brought an entourage, and he also brought a camera crew. And, if this was just like an average player, they probably would have never even let him work out. But since it's Antonio Brown, they still let him work out, even though it was against their wishes, the Saints. And they were blown away by his workout. He caught everything that was thrown. I think they want to see what the NFL rules on him, because there was maybe potential talking or rumbling that maybe they might try to sign him for the playoffs, which would, in a lot of people's eyes, if Antonio Brown can be half the player he's been, would probably make the Saints one of the most unstoppable offensive teams in history. And, the Saints have always had historic offenses, so that's nothing new. But, having Michael Thomas on one end and having Antonio Brown on the other end with Jared Cook and Kamara, that's and some Taysom Hill action. I don't know, man. That's going to be hard to stop. But, they brought him in. They wanted to get a little workout in. Like I said, he was impressed, and they're just waiting on the league to give a decision on it and to see if he will be able to play or is he going to be suspended for a few games. So,
I don't know how to feel about this. Just as a fan of the organization, as a fan of the Saints team, what do you do as your moral compass? Do you say, oh yeah, bring in Antonio Brown as a big middle finger to the league, because the league has Saints fans have felt the league has been against them for quite some time now, or do you stick with your convictions and say this guy does not need to be in the league right now because he hasn't proven to be professional enough to be in the NFL, and no matter the skill, because we always knew Antonio Brown was skillful. Before all of this, we thought he was the best receiver in the league, arguably besides Julio Jones and Michael Thomas. DeAndre Hopkins, top 5 for sure. So the skill was never the question if he could still do it. We know he can still do it. But at the end of the day, is it worth bringing all the like the paparazzi, the harassment, the sexual assault case, putting that on a different team? That's why the Patriots cut bait. They said, we got to win. We can't have this in our back pocket. We can't have this in our backyard. They already were caught for a cheating scandal. Imagine if Antonio Brown was still on the team. They probably would have found out weeks ago.
Oh, boy.
The Patriots let him go, and it's been a social media assault against the Patriots ever since. Could you imagine if the league doesn't allow this? The Saints are just going to get the same treatment, and he's going to be like this wherever he goes until somebody signs him, and they make him mad. And he's just not going to deal with it each and every single time until he gets some real help and really understands what he's going through and fixes his issues. He shouldn't be playing football, and that's just the end all be all of that. Even though it would dramatically raise the odds of the Saints winning the Super Bowl, it just should not happen. It's not good. It's not for good. It's not in good faith. And I mean, I guess the Saints had to give a workout in. But it's just really interesting how this guy gets so many chances when others rarely see one, And I have this theory that they actually brought in a total of 6 receivers to work out, but I have a feeling they really just want to see Antonio Brown, but they just don't want to bring him individually, because then, it's that perception of, they're individually bringing Antonio Brown. They want Antonio Brown, where they could bring in 6 other guys and be like, yeah, he's a part of that group, but it's not necessarily that we want him. So we don't want that type of media attention saying we only wanted him because we gave 5 other guys a chance. But that's just me, so. I mean, they still got all the media attention anyway.
Yeah.
It actually wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be. Like, say this happened on, a Tuesday. This might have been a bigger story, but since it happened during the wake of the national title coming up, a lot of national markets were just like, it's the Saints. We don't care. So, next thing to talk about really is Dan Quinn, Thomas Dimitroff. Falcons are bringing them back.
Yeah, man. They're bringing them back. The Falcons finished the season, I believe, with a 6-2 record down the stretch. after starting off the season horrifically. I mean, a lot of people were kind of iffy on it. A lot of people are worried. You don't really know. There's not a very steady feeling because you don't know. This is the second year in a row we finished 7-9. Second year in a row we finished strong. What if we start off bad again? You can't just do this. Well, let's wait till the end of the year and see. Because it's one thing if Dan Quinn went 10-6 and didn't make the playoffs. Well, yeah, you could keep him after that. He went 10-6 unless you're just like, oh, we didn't make the playoffs, so no. But, we can't have another season where we start off bad. And I think the Falcons, they're making some, like the thing is I can understand it because they have some things that are working. There's some things they can see. There's some things that they can change. They still have a lot of talent. And, one issue has been coaching consistency. Like 2 years ago, all the injuries on defense, the defense wasn't good. And people thought, okay, well, it's because of injuries. This year, the defense was mainly healthy. And Dan Quinn took over. And everybody remember what Dan Quinn did for the defense during the Super Bowl run. And then they looked bad when that happened. And then he had to give the privileges up to Raheem Morris. And then the defense looked good again. So if we could get consistent coaching on the defensive side and keep a consistent play calling, we'll be fine. Some people are also kind of very eerie about them keeping Dirk Cutter. Some Falcon fans are kind of like, I don't know. It's just been a big coaching consistency, a big coaching controversy.
You guys just don't know how good you have it about certain things. You lost Shanahan and he became a head coach. You weren't keeping Shanahan. You're not going to get Shanahan again. Actually, they wanted Shanahan gone.
Oh, yeah, after the first year, especially that first year, yeah.
They wanted him gone, and in the Super Bowl, they're like, good riddance because you screwed us over, right? So now all of a sudden, you're seeing Shanahan basically go on a Super Bowl run again with his own team, and now everybody's like, oh, yeah, Dirk Cutter can't get it done. Who was it last year before they fired him? Steve Sarkisian. No, he really couldn't get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one thing I said I've noticed with new offensive coordinators since Kyle is that the first year under a new offensive coordinator, Matt does not have his best year. Matt usually has a higher interception rate, lower touchdown rate under our quarterback. In his first year with Steve Sarkisian, he didn't have a great year. I think he only had 18-12. He did not have a great offensive year, but his second year, he had 35-7. But again, even with those numbers, Falcons didn't have the greatest record. And then the first year under Dirk, Matt Ryan's interception numbers went up again. So if they keep the second year technically with that means the offense should be better next year in terms of Matt Ryan's play and just overall. Like I said, the changes you need to make, and that's why they're keeping Dan Quinn, because they feel like he knows what he has to do. He knows that he has to get this team right because I'm sure Arthur Blank, when he told him I'm going to keep you, he's like, listen, if we start off bad again next year, you're gone. You're fired. All right? It's no ifs, ands, or buts. And I also think that may be a reason why they kept Dirk Cutter, because he has former head coaching experience, so they did have to make that fire. Well, you have a guy who used to be a head coach that can take over instead of maybe hiring a new offensive coordinator who maybe never potentially been in that role, and you may not want to put him out as your new guy. Even though Raheem Morris also has head coaching experience, they both, and the thing about it, if you think about it, both the coordinators were both head coaches for Tampa Bay at one point. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I feel like, if this, honestly, we have to see the adjustments and changes they make to the roster because they have some cap room issues with a lot of players they paid. They freed up some cap room by restructuring Matt Ryan's and Greg Jarrett's contract, and there's some rumors they might let go of Devontae Freeman, but we'll have to see what they do with cap, who they bring back, because they definitely got to bring back Austin Hooper, I feel like, because he's one of the best tight ends in the game, and just if they could get consistency on both sides of the ball and play like we think they can play, then the Falcons should be fine. Because you're coming into a division next year. You don't know how good the Panthers are going to be. You don't know if Jameis is going to be on Tampa. And basically the only team you know who should be probably good again next year is New Orleans Saints, unless somehow, some way Drew Brees retire. But we saw even without Drew Brees, y'all can still win. So, it's going to be very interesting what happens,
Yeah. So we're going to have to cut that for the segment, and we're going to come back after the break, and we're going to talk about some college football playoff action, some Clemson controversial win stuff, LSU thoroughly winning their game against Oklahoma. That'll be coming up right after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, as now we're going to get into some college football playoff recap. Not really recap, more just talking about it since it happened a few days ago. And I'm sure other networks have talked about it. I know I talked about it on the GSMC college football podcast. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, LSU, Oklahoma, what did you see?
Flat out whooping. LSU, they scored so flawlessly. They scored so beautifully. Joe Burrow, just an amazing quarterback. Oklahoma had no shot. It was.
What are you doing right now?
It was just like you watched it. You was like, wow. It's like you really wanted the game to be competitive, and it's just like when you saw how Jordan Jefferson scored that first touchdown. Then he scored that second touchdown. Then he scored that third touchdown. And they scored 28 points within, I think, a quarter and a half. It was just like, what? What just happened? And it's just like every time they got the ball, Oklahoma couldn't do anything. They couldn't do anything. And the fact that Joe Burrow had 7 touchdowns in the first half is ridiculous. And then I think he finished with 8 for the game. But he had 7 in the first. And then George Jefferson had 4 of those, I believe. And it's crazy, man. I just was so shocked by how dominant they were. I mean, it's funny because they were making a lot of arguments basically saying, Oklahoma should have never been in again. They're the Big 12. They don't play defense. Why do they keep getting in year? But it's just at the end of the day, who would have been a better matchup? Of course, someone's going to say an SEC team, but we already seen them beat Alabama and Georgia. So who? Florida? I mean, no. I mean, really? I mean, what some people said Oregon. I mean, I don't think you could. I don't think any team would have been able to stop. I think whoever played LSU in that spot, that's why when they got that number 1 spot, Bear, it was a guaranteed playoff berth. Because they had number 2, you could say, oh yeah, it might have been tougher had to play Clemson. Because, Clemson's the defending national championship. That game would have been competitive. And obviously, that would have been the game of the day. But when they play Oklahoma and just seeing how it goes, man, that was just the Mercedes-Benz massacre. So...
Oh, that's what they're calling it?
Yeah, man, the Mercedes-Benz massacre, bro. But what you think about the game?
Well, I mean, it's not tough to call. Most people thought LSU was going to win. I just didn't think, no one thought that it was going to be to the extent of how they won and just the sheer execution level of just their defense flying around. See, I think that's the thing people didn't expect. They thought that Oklahoma would be able to stay in the game a little bit for longer than what they did, just because people have underestimated LSU's defense all year. Since the Texas game, people have been saying that it hasn't been as good. And it showed up. They showed up to make sure to put the rest of the world on notice that, hey, we're not as bad as you think we are. And yeah, they still gave us some points at the end, but that's nothing new for LSU. They played their brand of football. Their brand of football is to cause havoc and make you quit. LSU will make you quit, and you're going to get garbage time points because they are going to take it easy. Because nobody runs up the score anymore in there's plenty of college teams run up the score. But when you're at that prestige and you have a head coach like Ed Orgeron, you don't run up the score like that. When it's over, it's over. Get your players out of there. You don't want.
He has that edge. He had that edge to LSU. Edge is like, even if you're down, even if we're beating a 56-0, you know what? Let's get another touchdown.
Well, in that game at the end, Joe Burrow and the rest of that team really take after Ed Orgeron's identity because of just how they act. They just said Joe Burrow was quoted in saying that's just what we're supposed to do. This was not like he didn't seem excited about the win. I'm sure he was happy, but like at the end of the day, he said, "This is what we were supposed to do."
This is when he said that, it was just like, yeah, we were supposed to drop 63 points.
Yeah, like I don't know if that's just the edge of him as a player, but that's just cold. He's cold-blooded, just like Ed Orgeron. Ed Orgeron was like, that was a good football team, and the Ed Orgeron thing. The deep Southern drawl, all that stuff.
It's like, yeah, they're a tough team, tough battle today on the field. From the first quarter to the fourth quarter, we had to try our hardest. And it's just like, oh, really, hey, Coach O? Okay.
Yeah, so Coach O got those boys right. And Oklahoma, even though they were missing some players, they had some injuries. The targeting call, that was the right targeting call.
That man went for the targeting, then going after Joe Burrow.
Yeah, so it was it was what we didn't expect to happen, but the result ended up the same. LSU won. And honestly, if they played Clemson, probably would have been a similar result. And if they played Ohio State, definitely would have been a similar result.
I feel that. I mean, it's interesting because after the game, the OU press conference with Jalen Hurts, he had a very touching press conference because, he's not eligible to play any more college football. And he was talking about how, usually, you want another chance to make it right because you transferred to OU and Lincoln Riley's going to the championship. And he basically was just like, I can't do that. I cannot come back and make it right with these guys. And it was kind of disappointing because with Jalen Hurts, some people might look at him as a great NFL prospect, but he is a guy who was one of the better college quarterbacks, especially this year under Lincoln Riley. And kudos to him and everything he's done in his career. But in other news, what about that next playoff game, Clemson, Ohio State?
That game was really good. It was it's what you want out of a semi-playoff game in the semis, right? You don't want blowouts. Blowouts have been happening for the past ever since the college playoff has been introduced.
You always have at least one blowout.
You have one blowout in the semis, and this was the games that you really wanted to see somebody really play. That's what everybody was saying. This was the real game to watch anyway. And it turned out to be a really good game, even though there was a lot of controversial calls. The targeting that took out one of Ohio State's better defensive players was not a good call. He shouldn't have been taking out the game, shouldn't have been targeting. It was just, I don't know what the ref saw on that play, but it definitely changed some momentum in the game. And then, of course, Clemson starting to score the actual touch. That was like a 4th and 15. Clemson gets the first down, they score on that drive. So that definitely flipped some things towards Clemson's favor. And then, of course, the incompletion or the reverse rule of a fumble to incompletion. A lot of people are trying to still argue about if it was a catch or not, and what the rule is on a making a football move or not. In my opinion, I think this is just a problem across all of football. Is just the use of slow motion replay is getting out of hand. If you watch it full speed, it's way more bang bang, and it doesn't look like he really holds on possession as much as you think he does. Honestly, it looks more like a pass breakup because somebody's trying to control the ball. It doesn't look like he's like making a move, in my opinion. But if you look at it in slow mo, now you see 1, 2, 3, 4, him tucking it in. I'm just like, but that's not how the play happened. There's speed that should add a factor to how fumbles occur. And usually that's how it does work. It's not like the ball was wiggling out. We know the ball was hit out like pretty strengthily by the defender. It was more so just how long did it take for that really to occur. So I'm for one to think that they need to really rethink about how they use slow motion replay when looking back at some of these plays, because this wasn't like somebody crossing the goal line. This wasn't somebody toe tapping it to secure a catch out of bounds. This was a bang bang play. This wasn't like you can see that in other things too. Like if you looked at the targeting call in slow motion, right? It doesn't look as bad, right? And like you can see a lot of different things, but they still ended up not reversing it. So it's not even consistent with how they use the slow motion, right? So I just think they need to review how they use slow motion in sort of that way.
Yeah,
But,
I feel that. The only thing about the targeting also is sometimes there's been this debate where there's basically been this debate where sometimes when you're going in for a hit, it's fine, and then the offensive player ducks, and then it becomes targeting. And it's like, well, you kind of can't change it to that point. So, and that's what I think kind of what happened with Trevor Lawrence. He kind of ducked a little bit, which is why they called it. Plus, on top of that, he got basically choked by the defensive lineman for Ohio State. And if you remember,
Young, right?
I believe so. If you remember watching that play, they had a close up on Trevor Lawrence. My boy Trevor Lawrence looked shook. He was like, "What just happened to me?" He was like, "Whoa!"
That's why that Trevor Lawrence run was so important to that game, because he didn't quit on that team.
Yeah,
and he didn't. He looked like he knew what he was getting into on that day, because that team they threw everything at Trevor Lawrence because they knew he was going to run the football, and they said, all right, come run the football. Come see what you're going to get through.
Yeah, you would never think so, since Trevor Lawrence isn't as big, even though he did gain some pounds of muscle over the offseason. You didn't think that. But also, I feel it just solidifies him as the number 1 overall draft pick in 2021, because he's doing it against big-time competition.
Really? You don't think Justin Fields?
I mean, Justin Fields only had 1 year. We've seen Trevor Lawrence for a year, about to be 2, and he's about to see him for his 3rd next year. So, in terms of, unless Justin Fields has like 70 touchdowns and 0 picks and 6,000 yards and 80% completion percentage, I think you got to go with Trevor Lawrence, because he's proven in big games he can beat teams. He's playing. He has arm strength, accuracy. He's mobile. He is like tall. He's literally everything you would want from a quarterback. He is like the solidified perfect construction of a quarterback, and then he has long hair, and that's just for accessory. So that's what I do say. Justin Fields would be probably the number 2 guy after him. So don't be surprised if maybe next year, depending on quarterback situations, you go 1 and 2. But yeah, I agree with you on the game. Great game. Iowa State really had some chances to win, but just couldn't get the job done. And it'll be interesting what happens in the college football national championship between those two teams, because Clemson's going to have to score some points if they're going to be at LSU. They're going to have to score some points. Now, I feel like their defense is probably the best defense they've played, I think, in my opinion, all year. Maybe Ohio. They're the best defense they've played all year. So I feel like they're going to be able to get some stops on LSU. Like, if you think about it, in the Georgia game, that was the best defense they played up to that point. They led 37 over 4 quarters, right? They scored 37 in the first half against Oklahoma. So if you could make it kind of that kind of game where it's like, yeah, they're going to score, but we can score 2 with you, I think Clemson has a chance to win the ball game. And the one thing I didn't notice this year was that the national championship usually it's playoff week, then play in the national championship. Now they have 2 weeks now where they're giving them like that Super Bowl where you get a week off, then you have the game. So it'll be interesting what happens in that game. You can definitely see what happens.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and take another break, and then coming back, we're going to talk about some of our most favorite players, biggest disappointments, surprises, just from the regular season. So that's what we're talking about coming up right after this break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, welcome back. Last time we were talking about some college football playoff stuff, and now we're going to get back to the NFL, where we're going to look at the season as a whole and who surprised us, who disappointed us for the 2019 NFL season. I'm going to go ahead and pick this one up. I'm probably going to start a little bit of a negative note, but I think The Browns offense has to be the biggest disappointing thing for me, because not only did it hurt my fantasy season, but I think it hurt a lot of NFL fans wanting to see Cleveland be good. And at the end of the day, they just weren't consistent enough. Odell didn't have a good year. Jarvis didn't have the best year. And Baker Mayfield regressed a lot. And the only thing shining on the offense was Nick Chubb, and he didn't get the ball enough. So when you look at it from that standpoint, it's hard to say that wasn't a disappointing half of football for that team. What do you think, Brice?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with a player. My most disappointing player. Actually, no, not even most disappointing. Most surprising player. So we're going to go back to the man himself, Mr. 30 for 30, Jameis Winston. Because, again, it is kind of crazy how you have 5,000 plus yards, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions. And then just the way the last game of the season ended for Tampa Bay with a pick six in overtime. I mean, there was just no other way that could have ended for him. He had to throw a pick to end the game. It wouldn't. It's funny because I was watching it live, and the announcer after the game said it. There was like a lot of noise, but he kind of said it kind of low key, like, "Oh yeah, by the way, Jameis Winston now has 30 interceptions on the season," and I'm just like, wow. I mean, like I said, he's a productive guy, but he's productive for both teams. And also, Bruce Arians was asked about Jameis, and he was like, well, if we can win with him, we can win with anybody.
Oh, yeah, I did read that just now.
Yeah, so he kind of, in a way, threw him under the bus a little bit, saying, I mean, listen, we were almost 8-8 with a 30-30 guy. So that should tell you how good this team is. Because if we could get a guy who was more efficient, maybe cut the interceptions, we probably would have had a better record. Tampa Bay has a lot of talent and potential. And and I think one of the questions also with Jameis is that even if they let him go, I mean, he's too talented in a way to like leave him out on the market. Like you feel like you want to pick him up because he can play. He has talent. If he has talent, he's gonna play. And I just think it's surprising to me just how the season unfolded for him because there was so much potential there. You know, you got that new quarterback. It's like Bruce Arians was brought in to make Jameis Winston better. And technically, if you look at 30 touchdowns, 5,000 yards, yeah, like he said in the press conference, I was balling. but the 30 pick, it's like, wait, so a guy was
just totally oblivious to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's so oblivious.
And he, like with me getting you a quarterback whisperer, that you threw more picks than you've ever thrown. I don't know how do you evaluate this man? You know what I'm saying?
You don't. I can just imagine people making videos of like, you know, the fake 30 for 30 commercials and stuff like,
oh,
what if I told you?
A man threw 30 touchdowns and 5,000 yards.
What if I told you a man was able to play on both sides of the ball? A player played for both teams on that day. ESPN 30 for 30 presents
30 for 30.
The Jameis
story.
Jeez, that would be so bad. All right, where do you think he could go though? I was just thinking about teams where he might have a chance to get some play. The Redskins, maybe. The Redskins might go for Jameis.
I think they're going to stick with Dwayne Haskins.
Really?
Yeah, I think he played better before he got hurt at the end of the season, but I think Carolina's potential spot. I mean,
Carolina?
Listen,
they already have Jameis. Cam Newton.
But Cam Cam ain't gonna throw 30-30. He gonna give you 18 and 15, okay? But he gonna give you some rushing touchdowns too. Jameis, with the weapons that Carolina has, I think it would be dangerous. They would probably have a top offense with Christian McCaffrey and more. If Winston was there, you could say maybe Chicago.
I thought about Chicago, but I don't know. They may just need to go get another draft pick.
I mean, Matt Nagy's an offensive guru, so you would think with his offensive play calling, maybe he's like, okay.
Is he really though? Like,
I mean, the first year with Mitchell Trubisky, he looked good. Second year, I think you figured him out. You see his limitations, and you just kind of know how to play him. So he's really 1 for 1, I guess, if you want to say that. And honestly, Winston's more talented than Trubisky. So,
well, yeah, obviously.
So
his arm talent for sure.
Maybe. I mean, who else would be in the market for him? I don't know. Maybe not the Chargers. I mean, if Phil Rivers did retire, maybe.
I just don't know if there's any team right now that
he's going to get picked up. If not, he's going to be paid as a top backup.
Maybe, yeah, for sure.
Kind of like a Teddy Bridgewater, paid as the top backup type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
You never know, man. I know you don't want to wish this, but Brice goes home. You might need to consider.
You're a fool. You're a fool. All right. Let's see. Most interesting for me, I would have to say, gotta say the Titans, man. I don't think anybody really had them going to the playoffs this season. Everybody was looking at the Ewing theory version of the Indianapolis Colts coming out of there and getting a W, or getting into the playoffs as a W for them. However, that just didn't happen. They got hurt really early in the season, and you know how the NFL goes. Once you start getting injuries, the team starts to crumble a bit, and you know all things kind of just go down the toilet. Mm-hmm. So here comes Tennessee picking up some good wins and winning games that they're supposed to, and then they're just staying in it. And then they're starting to get some chemistry. They're finding out their rookies are having a pretty good season, having more to offer. Derrick Henry, not resurges his career. He was having a good career before, but there was questions on whether or not he was actually really like a good productive back or not in the NFL. And now he has the rushing title for this season, and he's been excellent. And you can't really name a running back that you want really at this point in the season better than him right now, as far as just productivity and what he can do on the field, and just the attention he commands and stuff. So I'd say Tennessee is definitely a team I've thought has been very intriguing to watch throughout the season. And my pseudo team, I claim them only because I used to use them in Madden all the time. I don't know why I like the Bills. But I like Josh Allen and the Bills, man. They've been an interesting team. I always thought their defense is good. And Josh Allen doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He's definitely still not as accurate as you'd like from him from the quarterback spot, but they have a lot of interesting pieces. John Brown is really fun. Devin Singletary is really fun. They still have old man Frank.
Frank Gore.
He's just running the football, still getting 3 yards a carry and won't retire. But, hey, I like the Bills, and I think they've been really fun to watch.
I feel that. We got enough time for my last disappointing team?
Yeah.
All right. Disappointing team. Disappointing team is the LA Rams. They finished 9-7 this year, but it was very disappointing because LA is one of those teams that has a lot of talent. They have weapons. But it's almost like they're kind of crumbling kind of soon. Aging offensive line. Gurley's knees ain't right, so he's not the same running back, and you paid him money. Jared Goff, there's still some jury out on him if he's worth the money you paid him. Receiver injuries this year. Defensively not being as dominant. There's a lot of things about the Rams that you just thought, talent-wise, to begin the year, they could have made it back. And now, not making the playoffs, having disappointing performances, it's not a good look for them. And it's going to be, and they're also tied to the cap. That's the only thing about when you usually have a very high talented team is very, very high price tags. So you're tied to the cap. So if people start crumbling, you don't really have the cap room anymore. But you know, that's my most disappointing team.
Yeah, they definitely were a weird case of 1 year like bang or bust for real, because they definitely, and you know, they would look good one week and look bad the other. So I don't really know if it was a bust year. They just weren't consistent, and Jared Goff wasn't consistent, and Todd Gurley has not looked the best since the pre-arthritis in his knees and stuff. But that's going to wrap it up for the GMMC Football Podcast. I'd like to thank you for listening. Please don't forget to rate and review us on any platform that you decided to listen to us at. And we're hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network, so please check out all other shows and other programs we have on the platform. And please remember to like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so that way we can go ahead and get more content out there for you guys. And have a good rest of your day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.